The endless void of space stretched out like a dark, cold ocean. The space station, an old relic of a once thriving galaxy, floated silently in the vast emptiness. Most ships passed by without a second glance, ignoring the rusted docks and abandoned structures. To the galaxy, the station had become a forgotten place, filled with ships that no longer served a purpose. But there was one human who refused to forget. John Kessler, a former engineer turned scavenger, had been living on this station for months. His life had taken a sharp turn after his government had abandoned him. A skilled engineer, he was used to working on advanced ships. But now he was relegated to piecing together broken tech and discarded machinery. To most people, he was nothing more than a shadow, someone who lived on the edge of space, picking up the scraps others left behind. But he knew something that others didn't. Where others saw trash, he saw potential. Kessler had a gift for seeing value in things others discarded. He could look at the most broken-down spacecraft and figure out how to breathe new life into it. His fingers, calloused from years of repair work, worked tirelessly as he navigated through the junkyard of ships and technology that filled the station's docks. On this particular day, as the station's artificial sun began to set, Kessler wandered deeper into the junkyard. His boots crunched against the dust as he approached the area where the oldest ships were left to rot. Most had been picked clean long ago. They were nothing more than a skeleton of metal and forgotten dreams. But then something caught his eye. There, hidden in the shadow of the station's main hangar, was an old spacecraft. Its hull was battered, streaked with the marks of years of neglect. The engines were dark, lifeless. It looked like something out of a history book, a relic from a long-forgotten war, left to die with the rest of the broken ships. Kessler's heart skipped a beat. It wasn't much, but it was something. His hands itched with excitement as he approached the ship. He could see the potential. The engines could be fixed, the weapons systems upgraded. The ship might be old, but with his skills, it could be made to fly again. His mind began to race with ideas. "Let's see what you've got," Kessler muttered to himself. He climbed up the ship's hull and began to examine it. For hours he worked. He removed panels, disconnected old wiring, and replaced pieces of broken machinery with parts he had scavenged from other ships. He worked in silence, lost in the hum of his tools and the rhythm of his work. As he toiled, he thought about the galaxy's perception of humanity. To many, humans were weak, small, fragile creatures who had no place in the greater universe. They had no place among the powerful alien races that ruled the stars. But Kessler knew better. Humanity might be underestimated, but they had a fire that could never be extinguished. The galaxy had no idea what they were dealing with when they pushed humanity aside. His hands moved with precision, soldering wires, rewiring circuits, and replacing the old power core with a new one he had found hidden deep in the station's lower levels. The ship's power slowly began to hum to life, its systems flickering on one by one. The cockpit lights blinked, casting a dim glow across Kessler's face. As the ship's systems powered up, Kessler took a step back and admired his work. The ship wasn't finished, not yet, but it was far from the broken-down vessel it had been when he first found it. The foundations of something powerful were there, hidden beneath layers of neglect. Just then, a voice interrupted his thoughts. "You know that thing's just a pile of scrap, right?" Kessler turned around to find a group of aliens standing in the doorway of the hangar. They were tall, with green, scaly skin and sharp, cold eyes that scanned him with disdain. "You really think you can fix that? It's a junkyard ship. No one even bothers to look at it." The lead alien sneered. His voice was thick with mockery. Kessler stood tall and met their gaze. He wasn't intimidated. They didn't know who they were dealing with. "I don't need your approval," Kessler said calmly. "I'm just doing what needs to be done." The aliens laughed, clearly amused by the human's response. "Good luck," one of them said, turning away. "You'll be wasting your time. That ship's not going anywhere." As they walked off, Kessler couldn't help but smile to himself. They thought they knew better. They thought this ship was nothing but a useless piece of junk. But he knew the truth. With a few more adjustments, this ship would be more than just a relic. It would be something far more dangerous. And the galaxy was about to find out just what humanity could do when pushed to the limit. The old spacecraft creaked under Kessler's hands as he continued his work. His eyes gleamed with determination as he focused on each step. With the alien's mocking words still fresh in his mind, he poured his energy into the ship, fixing, upgrading, and adjusting each component with a level of precision that only someone with his skills could manage. His tools hummed and sparked, filling the hangar with a steady rhythm of work. Hours passed, and soon the ship, once a hollow shell, began to show signs of life. Kessler's hands moved with purpose as he reconnected the power supply, fueled the engine, and made the final adjustments to the weapon systems. Each part he fixed, each wire he connected, added something to the ship's growing potential. It was no longer just a forgotten relic. It was becoming something new, something far more dangerous. Almost there, Kessler whispered to himself as he surveyed his progress. But just as he was about to make the final adjustments, something unexpected happened. The ship's cockpit lights blinked erratically, and a low rumble sounded from the engine bay. Kessler's heart skipped a beat as the ship's systems suddenly seemed to come to life in a way he didn't expect. The ship hummed louder, its engines warming, and the pulse of its power surged. Kessler stepped back, his eyes wide as the sound of the engines filled the air. It was a terrifyingly beautiful sound, the sound of something long dead, now waking up from its slumber. He grabbed the controls and flipped a few switches, making sure everything was in order. He couldn't afford any mistakes now. His breath quickened as he realized that this was more than just an upgrade. The ship wasn't just functional anymore. It was alive with a new power that Kessler himself hadn't anticipated. For a moment, he just stood there, watching in awe as the ship's lights flared to life. He could feel the energy surging through its hull, filling every crevice of the once-abandoned vessel with raw, untamed power. Kessler wasn't sure if he had unlocked something inside the ship, or if the ship itself had somehow changed. Something in the ship's structure had shifted. It wasn't just a piece of old technology anymore. This ship had become something more than anyone could have ever imagined. Something dangerous. Kessler's mind raced as he began to think of all the possibilities. What could he do with this ship? What could it become? He suddenly felt the weight of his own ambitions. The thought of just using this ship to escape from the station, to find somewhere safer, wasn't enough anymore. This ship was a tool, and he was its master. A piece of the future had been placed in his hands, and he wasn't about to let it go. The moment of excitement was cut short by a loud clang that echoed through the hangar. Kessler spun around, his senses alert. There, standing in the doorway, was the alien group from before. They had returned. Their eyes narrowed as they took in the now activated ship. Kessler's gut tightened. He could tell they weren't just curious anymore. There was something different in their stance, something that made the air around them feel colder. The leader of the group, the same alien who had mocked him before, stepped forward, his eyes gleaming with a mix of suspicion and fascination. "You've done something with it," he said, his voice colder than before. "We told you that ship was useless." Kessler stared back at him, his expression steady. "Seems like I was wrong, and you were too." The alien narrowed his eyes, clearly unhappy with the response. "You don't understand what you're dealing with. That ship isn't just old. It's dangerous. It's a relic from a war long over, a time you shouldn't meddle with. Dangerous." Kessler raised an eyebrow. "It's just a ship. And now, it's more than that. You should have left it to me." The aliens exchanged uncertain glances, clearly uneasy with what Kessler had accomplished. Kessler knew that they didn't understand the potential of this ship, or him. The leader stepped forward, his tone now laced with warning. "You should leave it alone, human. The galaxy doesn't need more war. We've all moved past that. You don't want to bring the attention of the galaxy's powers down on you." Kessler didn't flinch. He knew what they were really saying. They were scared, scared of a human wielding the power to revive an ancient weapon. They were afraid of what he could do, and that made Kessler smile. "I'm not asking permission," he said, his voice calm but firm. "And I'm not stopping now." The aliens hesitated. There was an unspoken understanding between them. They didn't have the strength to stop him. Not yet. They had underestimated humanity. They thought the galaxy was full of weak, easy-to-control species, but they hadn't realized the depth of Kessler's resolve, or the potential of the ship he had awakened. With one last look of contempt, the aliens turned and left, leaving Kessler standing there, alone with the ship. But Kessler knew this was far from over. They would be back, and they wouldn't come alone. But for now, he had a ship, a powerful, dangerous ship, and he was going to make it his own. The hum of the ship's engines reverberated through Kessler's bones as he stood before its control panel, his fingers lightly brushing the smooth surface of the instruments. The ship was fully powered now, alive in ways he never expected. He marveled at the intricate web of systems, blinking lights, and hums as the ship's power coursed through its circuits, filling the hangar with an eerie, almost living energy. It was no longer just a relic. It had become something extraordinary, something that could reshape the course of everything. The once-forgotten spacecraft had transformed into a war machine. Its engines were sleek and efficient, a far cry from the rusty, ancient engines that had first been installed. The hull had been reinforced and outfitted with devastating weaponry, capable of taking down even the most formidable of adversaries. This wasn't just a ship, it was a force of nature, a weapon meant for destruction. Kessler grinned as he thought of the aliens' departure. They had no idea what he was capable of. They had underestimated him, and now they would regret it. He had become something they feared, a force of one. He had worked tirelessly for days, cutting off the comm systems that connected to their galactic network, erasing traces of himself from the galaxy's watchful eye. They could no longer track him. They had no idea what he was planning. His mind raced, running through the possibilities. He didn't just want to escape. He didn't want to hide. He was going to show the galaxy exactly what humanity was capable of. If the galaxy feared war, then they would tremble in fear of what Kessler could unleash. If they thought humans were weak, naive creatures who could be easily ignored, then he would prove them wrong. He would teach them that humanity wasn't here to be controlled, it was here to take charge. But as he sat back in the captain's chair, ready to take off and embrace the vast unknown, something in the pit of his stomach told him the journey ahead wouldn't be easy. The galaxy wasn't going to accept the rise of humanity so easily. The cosmic powers wouldn't just let a single human stand against them. Before he could continue, a sudden warning light flashed on the control panel, followed by an automated voice. "Warning. Unidentified ship detected. Approaching." Kessler's breath hitched, his hands tightening around the controls. It wasn't the aliens from before. This was something different, something far more dangerous. He quickly scanned the system's readings. The unidentified ship was fast, its trajectory aimed directly at his location. He clenched his jaw, activating the ship's defensive shields and arming the weapon systems. Whoever they weren't here for a friendly chat. This wasn't a mere coincidence. The ship appeared on his radar. It was large, menacing, and unlike anything he had seen before. Kessler's eyes widened. This wasn't just any random ship. This was a warship, a heavy-duty battleship, easily capable of taking down an unarmed target with ease. The communication system buzzed, and a chilling voice echoed through the speaker. "Human Kessler, you have awoken something you don't understand. Surrender now, and we may be able to resolve this peacefully. Resist, and you will face the consequences." The words made Kessler's blood boil. The arrogance. The assumption that he would simply bow down to their threats. They hadn't learned anything. "I don't think you understand," Kessler said through clenched teeth, his voice low but resolute. I didn't wake this ship up to run away. I woke it up to fight. And if you want to fight, I'm more than ready to give it to you." He slammed his hand onto the control panel, and the weapons systems roared to life. The ship's engines surged forward as Kessler engaged the battle mode, maneuvering the ship with precision. It wasn't just about speed. It was about showing them that he had control now. He would no longer be the pawn in their game. The enemy ship opened fire, its weapons unleashing a hail of energy blasts toward Kessler's ship. He veered sharply to the side, feeling the blast whiz by his ship's shields. He knew this wasn't going to be easy. The enemy wasn't pulling any punches, but Kessler didn't flinch. Instead, he smiled as he unleashed the full force of his ship's weapons. The ship's cannons fired, striking the enemy vessel with powerful energy beams that lit up the dark expanse of space. For a moment, Kessler could see the flash of sparks and debris from the enemy ship's hull. But the enemy ship was quick, dodging the attack and retaliating with even more firepower. Kessler's heart raced, but his mind remained calm. He had spent years studying military tactics, mastering the art of combat. He knew how to outthink an enemy. "Come on, come on," Kessler muttered to himself as he pushed the ship to its limits. His hands danced over the controls, steering the ship like an extension of his own body. He could feel the adrenaline coursing through his veins. This was what he had been waiting for. The battle raged on, the two ships exchanging fire in a dance of destruction. But Kessler knew something the enemy didn't. He had the advantage. He knew the ship inside and out, its weaknesses and its strengths. The enemy was blind in comparison. With a final, calculated maneuver, Kessler blasted a hole through the enemy's shields and sent a powerful energy beam directly to the enemy's core. The warship faltered, its systems sparking as its hull buckled under the assault. The enemy ship was defeated, crippled by Kessler's unrelenting power. Kessler breathed a sigh of relief, but only for a moment. He knew this was just the beginning. There were far greater challenges ahead. And now, the galaxy would know that humanity wasn't a species to be taken lightly. The real fight was only just beginning. Kessler sat in the cockpit of his newly transformed battle-ready ship, his eyes fixed on the crippled enemy vessel as it floated helplessly in the void of space. The explosion had sent a powerful shockwave across the stars, and the light from the blast still flickered in the distance. His heart pounded, but it wasn't from excitement. He could feel the weight of what he had just done. He had proven his point. He wasn't going to cower or beg for mercy. But as the enemy ship drifted, silent and still, Kessler knew this victory came with consequences. He had made his enemies aware of one thing: humans were not weak. Humans would no longer be pushed around. But that declaration had repercussions. The galaxy was vast, and it was filled with powerful beings, all who had been watching, waiting for humanity to show its true hand. Now, the cat was out of the bag, and Kessler had no idea just how many would come for him and his new ship. The enemy ship's transmission system flickered back on. The holographic message it sent was barely coherent due to the damage it had sustained, but the voice on the other end was unmistakable. You have no idea what you've just done, human," the alien leader's voice rasped. The tone was full of anger and disbelief. "You've opened a door that should have stayed closed. You've made a mistake that will haunt you. The galaxy doesn't take kindly to those who disrupt the balance." Kessler leaned forward in his chair, watching the flickering hologram with a mixture of curiosity and contempt. "The balance? You mean the balance where you and your allies trample over every race that doesn't bow to you?" He scoffed, his fingers dancing over the controls, engaging his ship's sensors to track any approaching threats. "I'm not your puppet anymore. You wanted to test me. Now you'll get a front-row seat to what happens when humans fight back." The alien leader's image flickered violently before the transmission cut off. It seemed the aliens had underestimated just how far Kessler was willing to go. He had not only fought back, but done so with such ferocity that it left the galactic powers reeling. Kessler's ship was now one of the most formidable war machines in the galaxy, and the information about it was bound to spread like wildfire. Kessler set a course for the nearest uncharted system. He didn't want to be found. Not yet. He needed time to think, to plan, and to prepare for the inevitable attacks that would come. But even as he flew through the void, the images of the alien leader's final words echoed in his mind. "You've made a mistake that will haunt you." The words lingered like a cloud over his thoughts, and for a brief moment, Kessler wondered if he truly had made a mistake. What if the galaxy's wrath truly was something he couldn't overcome? What if he had opened a Pandora's box that even he couldn't shut? But then, the memories of the days spent working on the ship, transforming it from a forgotten relic into a weapon of unimaginable power, reminded him of one truth. He had made his decision. He wasn't going to turn back now. Minutes turned into hours as Kessler steered his ship through the silent, dark expanse of space. He knew the inevitable was coming. He would soon be hunted. The galaxy's most powerful races would soon know that humanity wasn't just a species to be exploited. They had their own strength now. Kessler had set that chain of events into motion, and the universe would never be the same. He couldn't stop what was coming, but that didn't mean he couldn't prepare. He wasn't just going to fight to survive. He was going to make the entire galaxy fear humanity's wrath. The ship's radar beeped suddenly. His hand flew to the console, eyes scanning the incoming signal. A fleet. A massive fleet, much larger than what he had faced before. The ships were coming at him fast, faster than Kessler had anticipated. He could feel the blood drain from his face, the weight of reality settling on his shoulders. The time for preparation was over. He had no choice now. The enemy had arrived. They weren't just sending one ship. They were sending an entire fleet to wipe him out. And in their eyes, he was nothing more than a blip on the radar, a small, insignificant target. But Kessler didn't share their view. He knew they underestimated him. He gritted his teeth and stood up, his gaze steely. This was the moment he had been waiting for. They thought they had the advantage, but they didn't know what they were about to face. Kessler activated the ship's weapons systems, his mind already calculating his next moves. It would take all his cunning and his ship's new weaponry to survive this encounter, but he was ready. They were coming for him, and Kessler was going to make them regret it. Kessler's fingers hovered over the controls as the enemy fleet closed in. His breath was steady, but inside, his mind raced. He had fought battles before, but never like this. The ships that approached him were not just any enemies. They were the most powerful warships the galaxy had to offer. The kind of ships that had flattened entire planets without breaking a sweat. They were sent by the galactic elites to put an end to his defiance. Targeting systems online. Kessler muttered to himself, taking a deep breath. He could feel his pulse quicken as the enemy ships loomed larger on his radar. He wasn't just a human anymore. He was a force to be reckoned with. He had the advantage now, and he intended to use it. He activated the ship's cloaking device, making sure he was invisible to the incoming fleet. His hands moved swiftly across the controls, ready to turn the tables in his favor. As the fleet neared, Kessler waited for the perfect moment to strike. His ship had been transformed into a beast, armed with weapons that even the most advanced alien technology could not match. The battle was about to begin. Through the ship's advanced sensors, Kessler could see the enemy vessels coming into range. They were closing in fast, far faster than he expected. The sheer scale of their fleet made him wonder if he had miscalculated. Maybe he wasn't as prepared as he thought. But then, the image of the discarded spacecraft he had worked on so tirelessly came to his mind. The ship he had turned into a weapon. It was a symbol of everything he had fought for, everything he was now willing to risk. Time to show them what humanity is really capable of, Kessler muttered, a cold smile spreading across his face. With a flick of his wrist, Kessler disengaged the cloaking device and shot out from his hiding spot. His ship, now fully visible, rocketed through space, locking onto the first enemy ship with pinpoint precision. His weapons systems powered up, And before the enemy even had time to react, Kessler unleashed a devastating volley of laser fire. The first enemy ship exploded in a brilliant flash of light, sending debris scattering into the black void. The blast sent shockwaves across the fleet, and Kessler knew they hadn't expected him to strike so swiftly. He could hear the crackling of the communication system as the alien leaders screamed in panic. "Target the human ship. Destroy it," the alien commander ordered frantically, his voice full of terror. But Kessler was already on the move, weaving his ship through the chaos. He wasn't going to give them a chance to retaliate. His hands moved like lightning, his reflexes sharp as he weaved in and out of the oncoming fire. He could hear the faint hum of energy blasts as they missed their mark, narrowly avoiding his ship. Kessler grinned, his eyes never leaving the controls. This was what he had trained for. This was his moment. And now, the galaxy would see what a human could do. Another alien ship entered his line of sight, and he didn't hesitate. He activated the ship's advanced plasma cannons and aimed directly for the vulnerable points on the enemy ship's hull. The blast struck with unrelenting force, disintegrating the ship in a fiery explosion. Kessler didn't even have time to admire the results. He was already moving on to the next target. His ship was a blur, dancing through the stars as he tore through the enemy ranks. His weapon systems were a symphony of destruction, targeting the weak spots on the enemy ships with devastating accuracy. Each strike sent another alien vessel to the void, and with every victory, Kessler's confidence grew. He wasn't just surviving, he was thriving. But then, a cold chill ran down his spine as the remaining fleet shifted tactics. They weren't attacking blindly anymore. They were forming a coordinated strike. They had realized that they couldn't fight him head-on. Kessler knew what was coming. An ambush. Suddenly, from all sides, Kessler's sensors flared with incoming fire. Dozens of enemy ships surrounded him, cutting off his escape routes. For the first time, Kessler felt the weight of his situation. He had been too confident, too reckless. The enemy ships launched a barrage of missiles, and Kessler barely had time to react. His ship shook violently as several missiles made contact. Sparks flew from the consoles in front of him, and the lights flickered. The ship groaned as the hull took the hit, but it held strong. He had underestimated the force of their retaliation. But Kessler wasn't done yet. He gritted his teeth, staring at the warning lights flashing across his screen. His ship was damaged, but it wasn't out of the fight. If anything, the damage only fueled his determination. "Come on, you bastards," Kessler muttered, his voice low and dangerous. "You want to fight? You've got one." He slammed his hand on the controls, activating the ship's emergency thrusters. The ship shot forward at lightning speed, narrowly avoiding another incoming missile. Kessler's mind raced, calculating his next move. The odds were stacked against him, but he wasn't going to give up. Not now. Not when humanity had everything to lose. With a defiant roar, Kessler made his decision. He activated his ship's hyperdrive, just as the alien fleet closed in. In an instant, his ship disappeared into the void, leaving behind a cloud of destruction. The battle wasn't over. Not yet, but for now, Kessler had escaped. The galaxy would soon know that humanity had entered the war, and they weren't going to back down. Kessler's breath was heavy, his heart racing. The emergency hyperdrive jump had been a gamble, one that had saved his life, but the victory felt hollow. The ship's internal alarms still screamed in his ears, a reminder of the damage it had sustained during the battle. He had fought hard, but the war was far from over. The alien fleet would regroup, and they would come for him again. And next time, they would be ready. As the stars blurred into streaks of light outside the viewport, Kessler's mind raced with options. His ship was damaged, but he wasn't without resources. The system he had jumped into was remote, isolated, perfect for repairs. But even as he steered the ship toward an uninhabited planet to patch up, the haunting question lingered in his mind. What now? He gripped the controls tighter, his knuckles white. The once forgotten vessel, the one that had been cast aside and left to die, was now his war machine. The sheer irony wasn't lost on him. Humanity had been dismissed, belittled, and discarded for so long. Now they had a champion. He had become their symbol, the one who would rise from the ashes. But what if this was just the beginning? The hum of the engines dimmed as he descended toward the planet's surface. The time to repair was short, and Kessler knew he had little room for error. He needed this ship to be perfect, ready for whatever came next. The damage to the hull would take time to fix, but the core systems, the weapons, the shields, the engines, those were his priority. A small barren moon floated nearby, and Kessler knew it would serve as the perfect cover. The planet was a quiet, dead world, no galactic races nearby to notice his movements. This was his sanctuary, a place where he could make the ship truly his. He just needed time. Landing the ship with a soft thud, Kessler immediately got to work. He opened the maintenance panel, his eyes scanning the readouts. The damage was extensive, but not irreparable. He started with the engine's power core, rerouting auxiliary systems to stabilize the power flow. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he worked with intense focus, his hands flying over the controls, making adjustments that he had learned from the many years spent on countless ships across the galaxy. As hours passed, the ship began to hum with life once more. The thrusters powered up with a steady pulse, the weapon systems online and ready for combat. The damage had been repaired, but Kessler could feel a deeper shift inside himself. He wasn't just repairing a ship anymore. He was building something more, something dangerous. By the time the work was done, night had fallen on the planet. But Kessler didn't rest. He couldn't. He had a mission now, a purpose. The galaxy had underestimated humanity for too long. It had belittled them, dismissed their potential. Now it would pay the price. The fleet he had destroyed was just a small fraction of what they had at their disposal. They were arrogant, but they wouldn't be for long. Kessler stood before the control panel, his eyes narrowing as he gazed at the blinking lights that indicated the ship's readiness. It was time. He had to show the galaxy that humanity had arrived, and they weren't going to let anyone, stand in their way. He activated the comms, and his voice rang out clear, defiant. "This is Kessler, the last human survivor. To anyone listening, you've made a grave mistake. We're not the weak species you thought we were. We're not just survivors. We're warriors, and we'll tear through every last one of you, if we have to." A sudden crackling noise came through the comms, followed by a voice Kessler had not heard in years. "You think you can stand against the might of the Galactic Council, human?" It was the same voice that had sneered at him from the other side of the communications panel during their first meeting, the same voice that had sent him to his death. "You are nothing but an insect, unworthy of the stars you claim to fight for." Kessler's grin spread wide. "I may be an insect, but I'll be the one who's crawling across your doorstep soon. Prepare yourselves. Humanity has just begun." He cut the communication. No more words were necessary. The Council would soon understand the message. The Dithworlder, the last human standing, was ready to wage war. And this time, no one would be able to stop him. With a flick of his wrist, Kessler initiated the hyperdrive sequence. His ship blasted off from the barren planet and into the unknown depths of space. The next step of the journey was clear. The galaxy had yet to realize the storm that was coming, but by the time they did, it would be too late. As he disappeared into the stars, Kessler couldn't help but feel a surge of pride. Humanity had always been underestimated, but that would no longer be the case. The Dithworlder had risen, and now the galaxy would learn the price of their arrogance. And when they did, they would regret the day they ever thought a human was too weak to fight. Kessler's ship cut through the vastness of space like a blade through silk. His fingers danced over the controls with precision, the hum of the ship's systems echoing in his ears. The ship had been reborn, and now it was more than just a tool of survival. It was a weapon one that would change the balance of power in the galaxy. The hyperdrive's engines roared as he jumped into a new system. His destination was clear: the heart of the Galactic Council. The time had come for the universe to understand humanity's true strength. But Kessler wasn't just on a mission to prove a point. He was on a mission to break the very foundation of the galactic order that had turned its back on Earth. He wasn't the last human. He was the first in a new era of power. The coordinates flickered across the display. An outpost on the edge of Council space, a place where intelligence was gathered, a nexus of political power. It wasn't the capital, but it was a crucial first step. Taking it would send a message the Council would never forget. His pulse quickened as the stars began to streak across the black expanse. His mind raced with possibilities, the weight of what he was about to do pressing down on him. He wasn't just fighting for survival anymore. He was fighting for humanity's place in the stars. The ship dropped out of hyperspace with a sudden, bone-rattling jolt. The system around him was silent. A barren rock sat in the distance, an unassuming outpost that looked insignificant on any ordinary day. But to Kessler, it was the key to the Council's downfall. He had learned everything he needed to know. The Council's arrogance would be its undoing. He set the ship's course, aligning the weapon systems with deadly precision. Every movement, every adjustment was calculated. His heart beat louder in his chest as he approached the target. But then, a warning flashed on the display. A ship, an advanced alien destroyer, was approaching. Kessler's fingers hesitated over the controls. He had expected resistance, but he had hoped for more time. This wasn't just a skirmish. This was the beginning of something much larger. The destroyer, heavily armed and capable of devastating force, was coming straight at him. But Kessler didn't flinch. He smiled. "Let them come," he muttered under his breath. He fired up the weapons systems, the ship's forward cannons lighting up with a bright, searing pulse. The alien ship returned fire, massive plasma beams streaking across space toward him. Kessler jerked the controls, weaving the ship in and out of the incoming shots with remarkable agility. The human-built ship was a death trap to anyone who underestimated it. Kessler lined up his own shot, targeting the core of the alien ship. The alien destroyer fired again, a direct hit on the ship's outer hull. Sparks flew inside the cockpit, but Kessler gritted his teeth and pushed forward. This was nothing. He was human. He had survived worse. He fired, and the beam from his ship struck the destroyer with pinpoint accuracy. A massive explosion tore through the enemy ship, its core breaching in a fiery blaze. The destroyer broke apart in an instant, pieces scattering into space like shrapnel. The fight was over as quickly as it had started. Kessler's heart raced, but the adrenaline was nothing compared to the exhilaration he felt. This was his message to the galaxy. He was not some weak, fragile creature that could be crushed by the alien races. Humanity had the power to fight, and to win. His comms activated, a crackling voice coming through. It was the same voice he had heard before, the voice of the Council. "Kessler, you fool. Do you think you can defeat us? You've only begun to understand the consequences of your actions." Kessler's lips curled into a grim smile. "I understand perfectly," he said, his voice calm and cold. "And I'm just getting started." The comms cut off abruptly. Kessler steered the ship toward the station, his resolve stronger than ever. He would dismantle their power structure, one piece at a time. The Council had no idea what it had unleashed when it threw him away like an old relic. They thought they were untouchable. They thought humans were weak. But Kessler had proven otherwise. Humanity's potential was limitless. He docked the ship with the outpost, the metal grinding against the station's docking port. As the ship's systems powered down, Kessler took a deep breath. His plan was simple: infiltrate, sabotage, and destroy. This was only the first strike in a war that would shake the foundations of the galaxy. He didn't know what awaited him inside the station, but one thing was certain: the Council would never see him coming. Stepping out of the cockpit, Kessler felt the weight of the moment settle on him. The war had just begun, and the galaxy would never forget the name of the human who dared to stand against the greatest powers in the universe. With a determined stride, he walked toward the station's hatch. The universe had a new power to reckon with, and humanity was no longer the underdog.